All right, if you want to know if Kyle was a hitman, this would be the kind of, you would be totally like Philip Raven from this movie. You would adore cats. You know, if you abuse his cat, he would kind of slap you around. And
yeah, I get swayed by ladies.
And Veronica Lake, yes.
I'd get swayed by Veronica Lake and cats. I don't know. I can't deny it.
Yeah. So, a previous episode, we talked about Maltese Falcon. That was kind of the catalyst for noirs. And this movie really really cemented the genre of what a film noir is. It came out in 1942, so it's over 80 years old nowadays. So, and now we're going to talk about it. The movie that really kind of launched the whole style of film noir. This is it. It's called This Gun for Hire.
All right, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals. Eventually, we're going to get our top 10 list of 1997 films. And today, we're going to talk about a film that I think is a marquee for film history. It came out in 1942 and cemented film noirs. It's This Gun for Hire.
All right, so hitman Philip Raven has just killed a blackmailer and been paid off in hot money by the traitorous Willard Gates.
Dun, dun, dun.
At the same time, entertainer Ellen Graham has been recruited to spy on Gates for the police and Senate. But when Raven and Graham cross paths, they find a shaky truce forming.
Okay, so a couple of episodes back, we critiqued the movie L.A. Confidential. There's kind of an homage to film noirs of the 40s. In fact, in the movie L.A. Confidential, Kim Basinger is supposed to be a Veronica Lake lookalike from this movie. In fact, she's playing the movie on a projector as she's entertaining a client in the movie, and it's showing Alan Ladd. So it's almost, this L.A. Confidential is almost a little bit like This Gun for Hire, you know, dirty cops and betrayal, but also the emphasis of Veronica Lake in the movie as well. Veronica Lake, this is her star. This is Alan Ladd's breakout career movie as well.
It's just important to note, though, that Kim Basinger is basically doing Netflix and chill at that point. But no, it's interesting, because I had seen L.A. Confidential a couple of times. I knew about Veronica Lake as an entertainer, but I'd never seen any of her movies before. This kind of area, like I consistently talk about the 30s, 40s, and 50s. If you weren't a horror movie, I probably wasn't watching you very much. I watched a lot of the classic horror stuff, but this area for non-horror has kind of been a bit of a empty space for me. So it's nice to be able to revisit these kinds of movies, especially noir, because noir has never really been my thing until I met you, and you kind of gave me a little bit of like an around the history of it, and I've been able to experience that from doing this show with you. This is not one I would have picked out on the outset. But one thing I really appreciate about it is the cruising speed. You know, having a movie that runs 81 minutes, and it's just, part of me wishes it was longer, because I do think that the reason why there's a few more, like, you know, kind of like similar beats as a lot of other films is because they don't take time to flesh out as many of them. So it's kind of that thing where it's like, I like the speed at which it moves, but I also would have liked if they'd spent more time on some of the various elements, because it does seem like they move too fast at times. It's kind of that double-edged sword of it all.
And I think it's a lot of this movie, and another reason why I brought this movie is because there's a lot of things we see from other previous movies that cite this movie. So like L.A. Confidential, you see the inspiration for Jessica Rabbit for Who Framed Roger Rabbit as an inspiration almost of one of the three elements of very much of Veronica Lake, of very scandalous, almost like her dress is going to fall off. And this is from this movie. Alan Ladd's breakout career. We know Alan Ladd would have a career after this movie. He didn't really get a lot of film roles before this because he was a very loud extra. He was there at theater, very projecting. And then he married his talent agent, Sue Carroll. She was a silent film star. And she actually coached him. Maybe you should dial it back a little more, be a little more reserved. And this is the movie that it's kind of weird that we know that he was complete opposite, because this is the Alan Ladd we all are not saying very much, of just almost being part of the scenery a little bit and just standing in the shadows and not saying very much dialogue. That this is kind of launched his career from his wife, talent agent Sue Carroll's inspiration.
She's kind of like, you're a bit over the top, you should scale it back. And then he goes, she's like, too much. A little bit less now. Because he does, he's very, I don't think it's bad. If it sounds bad if I say it this way, he's very wooden at the beginning. But I think it's because he's kind of a machine at the beginning. He doesn't really have a soul at the beginning of the film. because he's willing to. I mean, and of course, as you pointed out, they avoid the violence against women at the beginning of this film because he shoots through a door.
Right, they had to go through the code that the pre-code of you can't show a girl getting murdered. So what they do is they through the door.
Yeah, it's a very Terminator-esque thing though. When you go back to like the '80s Terminator and he can like see the heat signature through the door, it's like, yeah, it's kind of what he's doing with this movie too. Is she gets behind the door and he's like, it's almost like he's a robot doing the job, and it's because he doesn't really have a soul. If it's not for cats, like he respects the animals, but like human beings, no, it's fine. He's basically every person watching any movie today. You can kill a bunch of humans, that's fine, but if you kill a dog, people are gonna revolt.
And the girl on the steps. Oh, you're coming to visit? Yeah, and he murders the person. Look, because you almost think, is he gonna kill the kid too? Because
yeah. And again, that's something too that we come across now is when we have our killers in movies, like the recent Halloween film that came out where Michael Myers walks up to a baby and you're like, oh God, he's gonna do that, isn't he? And then he avoids it, and it's like, we know kids and animals, those are off limits. Like if someone crosses that line, that's when you've gone too far. So he's got that kind of villainy to him, but he's not. You can't reach him. You can still reach him because he's not killing kids or animals. Like, he still has some part of him that's there, but he's willing to put away a lot of human beings.
A couple episodes we talked about Road to Perdition, and I gave a little backstory about Richard Zanuck's dad, Daryl Zanuck, who started 20th Century Pictures, and then they bought Fox Studios, and that became 20th Century Fox. Alan Ladd Jr., Alan Ladd's son, eventually became president of 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, okay.
So Alan Ladd Jr. eventually became president of 20th Century Fox Studios, and eventually went on to head MGM. And that's a little backstory there, like a little fun little nugget of, if you didn't know, Alan Ladd Jr. had a career himself.
Yeah, he owned this company, the Ladd Company. Named for him.
Didn't he finance a little? Didn't you have a little bit of money investment in the movie Alien too?
I think there was. Yeah, I think so. There's the Ladd family has been famous for a number of different things, but it's kind of like Alan Ladd. I hear the name so often that it wasn't until someone had pointed out to me that Alan Ladd was Shane that I was like, wait, but I thought you ran movies, and I was like, oh, there's a junior on that. There's a family aspect to this. People stay in the movie. It's so weird to think that people stay in the movie business like their predecessors. So many of them just like, I got to keep doing it because it's where I came from.
Any executive producer, Alan Ladd Jr., executive producer for Braveheart.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So, and then LA Confidential, a lot of the sighting of the movies. Let's talk about cast, because this is one of the things that works. We talk about Veronica Lake, who kind of started as what we call child pageant. She was doing her mom pushed her into like these child talent shows. It wasn't much like pageantry, but you had to do like skills like juggling and all that stuff. And so she was kind of familiar with it. And they introduced it in the movie that she can do these tricks.
The magic is very good when you realize that she's actually doing the tricks. Like that it's not us. I mean, it's all, of course, sleight of hand. But the fact that it's sleight of hand being filmed and there's no like touching up afterwards because you can't really CGI that thing right, in the 40s. Yeah. She's doing the real magic tricks. It's pretty good.
And she's really short. Yeah. I don't think she is even above 5 feet. So they had to do a lot of have a stepladder for her.
And she was the first Hobbit forced perspective actress in the film. But you can get away with that with high heels, I guess. In a noir film, you're going to be able to have a high heel section at some point. And
then she got a little bit of reputation of being salty on set, but it happens.
Yes,
but her mom was kind of like a really harsh enforcer to become famous. Almost like she didn't really have much of a childhood. She was kind of like being pressed to do the stardom. And eventually, I think she had to do a lot of I think she had to sue her mom to get some of her money back too. So it's one of those kind of stories that we hear of her being a childhood success and then, as an adult, kind of studio.
Yeah, but you said to me, I don't know much about. I'm going to ask these questions. Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd, they did a number of films together after this, but this was their first one.
Yes.
Okay, so they'd kind of become kind of the acting couple, if you will.
I think it was because after this movie, this chemistry, because I think there was one of those things like they worked so well, there was add some more scenes.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and this is one too where it's completely obvious that they weren't supposed to have scenes together as much in this film. But because they had good chemistry, scenes kept showing up. Because as you can see, Robert Preston is the second actor credited in this film. And Robert Preston, as a fan of The Last Starfighter, Robert Preston got screwed in this movie. Because he's playing a character that essentially disappears for the entirety of the film and then shows up to remind you that Veronica Lake did have a boyfriend.
This is the movie that he almost gave up acting.
Yeah.
He went back to England to do theater. He was tired of being talked at because a lot of movies he's just playing the cop.
Yeah, and he's one of the most boring cops in this movie. Even though I like his performance, I actually really like his performance. If they'd given him more to do, I'm sure I would have loved it.
We all want more for him to do, and even him wanted more to do, right?
But it's like they just realized like we have our focus elsewhere on the movie. We have our focus on the heat coming off the street of these two performers together. So Preston just go in the corner for a bit, you know?
Which is really weird because a lot of times when we talk film noirs, and this is kind of the codifying film for film noirs, we think this is the femme fatale, and she's not really the femme fatale in this movie. She's almost like, trying to point their morality needle a little bit.
It's almost like Lad is kind of playing against type as a femme fatale. Like, it's or homme fatale. Remember we figured out with femme fatale, the male is homme fatale. He's kind of playing that in some ways where she's supposed to spy on him. She's the person that we're essentially looking at as our hero character. And then she gets involved with him. Like in any other movie, it would be the guy spying on the girl, and then he gets involved with her. He's kind of playing against that type a little bit.
Yes.
Because we don't, again, we want to, I feel like we're supposed to want to trust Alan Ladd's character. We want to trust Philip Raven because we do see a soul in there. He doesn't hurt animals. He doesn't hurt kids. We can pull him back out. It's kind of the ultimate I can change him story about a relationship.
A little bit,
because
right,
she feels like she can maybe fix him.
Right. Because the woman that he actually had auditioned to is the woman he slaps in the movie, at the beginning of the movie.
Must have been a bad audition.
No, but then he's the one that they're the ones that shared auditioning. That before they got Veronica Lake, that she was doing the parts. I forget her actress's name. In the movie, Alan Ladd says, "I am my own police," and it's a movie. In the movie City of Industry, that's in 1997. Harvey Keitel actually says that line as well. I don't know if you can find a copy of City of Industry. Please let me know. I've been looking for a copy that's not a VHS.
Yeah, we've been wanting to talk about the movie, but it's kind of tough to find a feasible copy we can ship.
Yeah, but it cites this gun for a lot of the dialogue is lifted from this movie into City of Industry. I love to critique that movie and go back to see it again. So a lot of other things that you will see from movies get cited from this movie. So a lot of action movies have to go up the hierarchy of bad guys to get to the pinnacle top.
Yep.
You see a lot of that formula played out in a lot of movies. You see the ending happening in an industrial kind of fiery inferno. Yeah. And that happens in a lot of movies like Terminator, even
Child's Play 2.
Child's Play 2. A lot of the final act happens in an industrial factory setting.
Oh yeah,
where it's steamy and hellish and all that stuff, and they close the environment like the cops surround the perimeter,
or even just like The Big Clock, which has not an industrial flavor to it, but is a business setting where you are jammed in. There's no way to get out, and either the bad guys kill the good guys or the good guys kill the bad guys. There's only one way. One group is leaving.
Yes.
And that's why I feel like I enjoyed that element of it. I liked it more in The Big Clock. I like the enclosedness of that kind of story. I liked a little bit more than this one because this one did feel like it hit all the bases. Now again, I'm coming at it as a person who's seen a lot of the movies that were probably inspired by this movie.
So
that's why I have a couple of issues where it's tough to say. If you're watching this movie for the first time, you may feel more like how I feel about it, where it's like I've seen this done before, and that's kind of the sad thing.
If you watch this movie, you're like, oh my god, this is like Terminator.
Yeah, like I said, with the heat signature behind the door. How did Philip Raven know she was standing right there? I don't know. Movies, but I buy it because he does seem like a robot. So,
and all the noirs of being betrayed, and you're going to go after the people that hurt you.
Well, he has a reason that I buy his reasoning for wanting to go after. We haven't talked about Laird Krieger yet. Willard Gates, who is basically playing all, everyone here is playing all sides. That's why I wish the film was at times a bit longer, because there's so much happening in such a short amount of time that I wanted to take and breathe into all these interactions. We have Ellen Graham working for the Senate, but she's also, her boyfriend is a cop, and then she gets involved with this hitman.
She's got three different...
Yeah, we have the cop who's trying to find his girlfriend, but he's also got a job to do. We have the hitman who's hunting the guy who hired him to do the kill that he's being hunted for because the guy screwed him on the money. And then, of course, we have Laird Krieger as the guy who I paid him, but I also sold him out to the cops, and I'm interested in Ellen Graham. There's so many character interactions going on. That's why I wish the film had more time to breathe, because I do think there's something to it. But we don't spend enough time on those the parts that interest me the most,
And that is one of the things about film noirs that we enjoy, is this plot can be so tangled that eventually you just give up.
Yeah.
You just trying to find so many things of where it's going that eventually, like,
Yeah.
the heck with. Let me just.
That's the thing. It's. I would love to have just sat back and just embraced it, but of course, our role as critiquers here is to break apart the plot and make sure it makes sense.
Yes.
It's
almost
so
like
part of me was more frustrated by the like, God, I wish we would just breathe for a second so I could stop pausing.
It's almost like from The Big Sleep. You're trying to find out what I know, and I'm trying to find out what you know, and you want to know what I want to know.
Yeah. When really you don't know anything.
Yeah, you don't know anything. Right. And the audience doesn't know anything.
But yeah, Willard Gates, kind of one of those guys who had kind of either been leaving the business, coming into the business. He was kind of in a fluctuation during this film, right?
Lard Krieger playing Willie Gates. Yeah. And then he tragically, he's 30 in this movie. He looks older.
Yeah. He's got that. It's not because of his weight, but it's his physical presence in the film. He carries a lot of like proverbial weight. He is the person in the film who is, he's got this kind of like
Sidney Street in Maltese Falcon.
They could have been traded out. The two of them could have been in each other's films, and I don't think it would have affected either one all that badly because they both are very good at what they're doing in a unique way.
There's a where he gets noticed at the restaurant, but there's nothing ever developed about the reasoning behind that.
I know. I wanted to know more about that.
Such and such? No, which he really is.
Yeah.
It's the second time that's happened today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's kind of an intimidating guy because he is the person who has maybe outside of Philip, he's the one who's got the most mysterious past. He is our other villain of the film.
Yeah.
He's the one who's just kind of out and outright the villain, whereas Philip, we think we might be able to like sway him towards somewhat heroism.
We find like a kernel of good into him, just like Luke does with Darth Vader.
Yeah, whereas Gates is kind of like he's a bad guy, and the worst thing is he's even betraying the other bad guy. That's kind of the worst thing is doesn't even have a code of honor like how in mafia movies we still like the villains because they have a code of honor. He doesn't. And I do think one of the things that ages better when you see this film after seeing a bunch of other movies is that, of course, I grew up with the Universal horror, so I grew up associating Swan Lake with Frankenstein or with the Mummy.
Oh yeah,
Dracula.
the famous with the kid. The famous scene with the Frankenstein's monster and the kid.
Well, Swan Lake is the score for Dracula and the Mummy. Both of those films, their score. No, their score is completely based on Swan Lake. To the point, I don't know if there's any unique sound at all to those movies that isn't Swan Lake. So watching this movie, when Swan Lake shows up in the scene where Ellen Graham is hanging out with Gates at his home, it gives this proverbial eeriness because I grew up associating Swan Lake as a horror score. So when I heard it in there, I was like, something bad is happening. Like I got really tensed up. So it's one of those things that ages well with the movie if you're like me.
And so, like I say, this is the reason why we have to. You should see this movie because a lot of things you recognize from movies you've seen before are lifted from this movie, and it was a big hit when it came out. Final principal photography shooting ended December 7th, 1941.
Oh yeah,
and it came out I think in March of 1942. We associate a lot of film noir as after World War II, but this is kind of pre-World War II. A lot of film noir stories where have people that come back from the war, but this shows that a lot of noir, the kernels started pre-World War II. The book is called This Gun for Sale by Graham Greene. It's written in 1936. Went through a lot of drafts. It went through bunch 10 times I think before they finally got a script that they enjoyed.
And did Greene do a script? I thought Greene did one of them.
I think he even did more than one, right? Yeah. And so a lot of take it out of the oven, rebake it. Take it out of the oven, rebake it, mold it, add more ingredients, and finally they got something that they agreed on. And even after the final script, they've got reworked, add more scenes of Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd together.
Yeah, this movie was probably in flux just as much during production as it was in pre-production.
Yes.
And thankfully, it was sewn together nicely. Editing was done by Archie Marshak, who did The Most Dangerous Game in Calcutta. I think the editing is pretty strong in the film.
I agree, too.
Again, I would always appreciate more. Just more, but that's not always on the part of the editor. Sometimes the script just doesn't give us more. Sometimes the performances don't give us more. So I can't say that the editing didn't give us more because I don't know where it came from.
For technical talk about the director Frank Tuttle, he was during the American Activities investigation, left the country and went to France and stayed there after the Red Scare.
Oh, the Red. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so he was like, "Yes, I'm a communist. I'm leaving. Fine." And so he went to France.
All right, fine.
But we have to talk about cinematographer John Seitz.
John Seitz, yeah.
John Seitz, who actually is fascinating. He retired from cinematography in I think the 60s, but he has attached 18 patents to his name of camera inventions. So like on-set things of what you can do with the camera 18 invention patents are attached to his name for camera works. But he is the cinematographer that cemented the look of film noirs, using a lot of shadows, a lot of really set the environments of really, and he's the one that actually you lit the back.
Okay.
To project shadows going forward, which I use it in my films too.
Yeah.
Where you let the can almost like set the can back here that aims there, so the shadow goes here.
Okay.
And John set that mood, and Billy Wilder really liked what he used him, and he used him a lot for his. Billy Wilder used him. For
I
his
recognize
films.
Double Indemnity has a very similar visual palette.
Yes.
A lot of other elements of it are not the same at all, but there's a very similar visual aesthetic to it. And I could see it. I've never seen Sunset Boulevard, but in the scenes I've seen of Sunset Boulevard, it does have a similar visual.
Very much
well.
like almost like it's a haunted house.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So, he's got this. It's kind of an eeriness to it. It is kind of like the Swan Lake of visuals, because it isn't inherently frightening, but there's something eerie about it that when you apply yourself to it, it's kind of creepy looking. Yeah. There's a kind of like terror in the sunlight that comes with the visuals that he puts in play.
Eddie Muller, who hosts Noir Alley on TMC, he says it's looking good in hell. It's looking good, and looking great going to hell. But I always say it's looking.
It's my life.
It's looking great while you're condemned.
Yeah, because as you've always pointed out, noir is about no one's escaping, no one's getting out. We are all condemned to hell eventually.
Yes,
it's getting on the horse and riding in, and that's kind of what's at play with the visuals there, and that's kind of on play with a lot of the characters, is that we inherently know that many of our characters are doomed to not always die, but doomed to their circumstance.
And usually it's by their own decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the Nightmare Alley.
Yep.
Yeah, you could have stopped at any time and you went.
One part of me wonders if the whole essence of noir has to do with the codes at the time. Like, was it the Haze Code and stuff, where like the villains have to get their comeuppance? And it's like, well, sometimes it's, when you have a villain as your lead character, or a not good guy as your lead character, they will have to eventually fall.
You could in a movie, you can show a guy slapping a woman around, but you can't show him murdering.
Yeah, and it's like, you can get up until the point of death, but you better get her to a hospital then. Right. And it's like, yeah, that was the 40s for you.
So if you look like the Haze Code, if you look like films, like you show this person shooting a gun, but you actually can't show it in the frame, somebody shooting a gun and somebody else taking the bullet. You had to find some other, like, pointing the gun and then person, another shot camera, oh, I got shot.
Yeah, and they always said the bad guys can't get away. Like, that's the most important thing, is the bad guy can't get away at the end.
Yeah.
And as if that would have changed anything. Like, as if watching that would have driven people to a life of crime. I'm sure a couple people were, but, can you imagine today if they were like, video games, the bad guy always has to get his comeuppance at the end of the video game. Or
Same thing they did with the comic book code.
Exactly, yeah. Which, screwed over my favorite Tales from the Crypt.
It made it really, really sanitized.
So the movie was almost remade in 78 with Tony Richardson. That never came to fruition, but we did get a 1991 remake for television. Now, you haven't seen either, or you haven't seen the 1991 film, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
So, yeah, Lou Antonio, I don't know much about it other than that. But
you find a copy for me. It'd be
yeah,
interesting.
we'll have to take a look, and maybe that'll be one of our future episodes, is revisiting a television movie version of this story.
That's really weird.
I'm curious about another take at this, because I don't know if it's a remake of the film or another adaptation of the book. That's always a big distinction, is which one is it. So we could come down to that.
It is interesting to look at the television make of Casablanca.
Yeah, or the attempt at making the TV show. They did a pilot for a show, too, and it's like, wow.
It's in color with Scatman Crothers as the piano.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting to watch how you think Casablanca is supposed to look, and it's in color, too.
I find that so peculiar, the legendary films of yesterday being remade as a television movie, and because I've always felt if you're going to remake something, you should have one thing you think you can do better. It doesn't have to be all better, but have one thing you think you can improve upon or make your film stand out from, so that less people are focused on why did you make this movie. And I think making a television movie back during the time period when television movies were not like today, we didn't have Netflix, we didn't have any of that stuff.
You couldn't. It
feels like you're dooming yourself.
It wasn't so readily accessible.
Yeah, because even when we talked about 12 Angry Men, I had the same thing where it was like, they made a television movie version of this like decades later, and it's like, do you think you can do better? I mean, if you can, by all means do, but do you think you can? So
before we go, I want to let this little nugget about movies and TV. In the late 70s, they put Gone with the Wind on television. It was a 3-day event.
Oh, yeah.
and nobody's ever seen, probably never seen it ever since outside of the theater.
Yeah, I think it had been re-released one time, I believe.
You got to think we only had 4 TV stations at the time, but they put Gone with the Wind. That was a massive deal. And then after that, people started putting movies on television.
Oh, yeah.
And that was then prior to that, then it was like, okay, we don't have the rights to the movie. We'll just remake the movie on TV.
That was the thing, too, is because everyone had deals made and contracts written up, but television hadn't existed at the time period. So you had to renegotiate contracts with certain people if you were going to get the television rights. And that's why nowadays it's more included. Who gets the television rights? Like, we know when a movie comes to theaters, which you can actually find out which station has the rights
before
to it, which app gets it next. And that's why things like, a lot of Warner Brothers films right now are kind of like, are they going to do as well? Because 45 days later, there's a contract. It's going to HBO. Yeah. Disney is the same thing. This, most recently, Lightyear has kind of been underperforming, but Disney's got the rights. So in 45 days, it'll be on Disney. Like,
it's really weird in my lifetime how TV and film used to be like this, but now they're
it's sharing a bed.
They used to hate each other. In fact, movies used to chime the TV.
Oh, yeah. And people thought getting to TV was a death sentence for your career.
Right.
And now you may actually make more money on TV than you can in films.
Because even in Terminator, there's a scene where Sarah Connor turns out the television. Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah. And now it's your bills.
Now they're together. Yeah. So I think it's required viewing to see this for film history aspects, because a lot of stuff got lifted that you recognize from movies that you've seen today, like Kyle have seen. You're like, oh my God, that's from this movie, like inspiration even from Terminator.
Yeah. I think this is a teachable movie in a lot of ways. Where like it's one I would do your research ahead of time so that you are comfortable with the idea that there will be a lot of things in this that you've seen in other movies since then. Because me knowing that going in kind of saved.
I want to see the ultimate bad guy. He's the old crusty guy with the chop of the.
But if you look at this movie, not knowing its place in not just noir film history, but film history in general, you may not I don't want to say you won't understand. I just think it won't have the same effect as knowing it came from here.
Yes.
And this is one of those movies. It's not a pop in and check out movie. It's one that has a history. If you get a chance to watch it on a Noir Alley or stream it on an app that has some background stuff, it might be more beneficial because it's kind of got that teaching. It's kind of like how I watch a lot of my horror movies. I'll revisit them on Joe Bob Briggs' show because he goes into the history of it. And it makes it more fun to kind of share that with other people.
I agree. He does his research, man.
So that's kind of how I feel about this one. Is if you get a chance, if you see it on Noir Alley, check out that version of it. I watched a lot of the Noir Alley clips on YouTube after watching this movie so that I could get a little bit more context as I was watching, and I think that helped. So I enjoyed the film. I don't know if it's one I'll revisit a bunch, but I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about it.
But I think it's
I continue down the track,
And I think it's just even a one-time viewing to realize where a lot of stuff comes from.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it made me want to check out some more
Veronica Roger Rabbit to
Now I want to check out more Veronica Lake films, more Alan Ladd films, more films that have killers who like cats, the whole in between. But thank you guys for joining us. Let us know your thoughts on this Gunfire down in the comment section below. There's a lot more noir films out there.
Oh God,
Nick picks a lot of them. Why don't you try picking them by putting them down in the comments or joining the Patreon? If you join at the $5 tier, you can actually be on a rotation of people who select the movies we talk about on the show, so you can help decide our next noir film before he does. And then if you join at $1 tier, you can actually get access to our show with Picks with Kyle and Nick, our exclusive content online. Check out the Patreon down below. You can help support the show immensely. If you can't financially support the show, please like and subscribe.
Tell your friends.
Don't cost you anything. You can help support the channel that way. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right. I'm going to go adopt another cat, just so I know I'm safe.